All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. With the NBA draft and the start of free agency in the league right around the corner, you can always expect some big moves to go down involving star players. And one player to keep an eye on for this summer will be Washington Wizards All Star guard Bradley Beal. Beal has 11 years under his belt with the Wizards, but could his time in DC be coming to an end? There's a possibility that the Wizards could look to shop Beal this summer, but there are several scenarios to keep an eye on. Beal has a full no trade clause, which means that Washington is going to have to work with Beal's agent, Mark Bartelstein, to find a new team that the All Star guard would be happy playing for. Now, some things to think about. Kristaps Porzingis has a player option for next season at 36 million. Kyle Kuzma has a player option at $13 million. And the question is going to be, will Porzingis and Kuzma exercise their respective options? This will definitely have a huge bearing as to which direction that the Wizards are going to go next season. Because if Beal and pardon me, if Porzingis and Kuzma opt out, then I definitely think that the Wizards will definitely look to shop and more than likely move on from Bradley Beal. Also, what teams, if the Wizards do, trade Bradley Beal, and if he finds a team that he wants to play for, what teams would make the most sense for Beal to play for? And I'm just going to throw some teams out there. And feel free to agree or disagree. It's all good. One team I'm going to start with is the New York Knicks. You look at the Knicks; they got to the second round of the playoffs this year. They lost to Miami, and would a guy like Beal fit in that backcourt playing alongside Jalen Brunson? And very quickly, Jalen Brunson has become the feature guy, if you will, for New York. But on the flip side, would the Knicks want to do something that they haven't done in a while, which is trade assets, i.e., draft picks and young players? I'll guarantee you like this: if, and I'm just hypothetically speaking here, if the Knicks were to trade for Beal, Washington would definitely want a combination of draft picks and young players such as RJ Barrett. Would New York really want to pull the trigger on that deal? And I'm going to touch on that in a little bit later. Another team to keep an eye on, or and not maybe not keep an eye on, but a team that makes sense here would be the Philadelphia 76ers. And for me, thinking about Beal playing with Joel Embiid, you have a new head coach there in Nick Nurse. But for me, there's several layers to get ahead of. I think first and foremost that Philadelphia is going to exercise all of their options and attempt everything they can to try to keep James Harden first. Now, if James Harden does decide to leave Philadelphia in free agency, like some people anticipate, then I do expect Philadelphia to go after Fred Van Fleet. Fred Van Fleet played for Nick Nurse in Toronto. He was a part of that championship team several years ago for the Raptors. And of course, he is very familiar with Nick Nurse's system. If that were to fall through, maybe Philadelphia would go take a hard look at Brad Beal. We'd have to wait and see. The Los Angeles Lakers. And I say this because when you think about LeBron James, whichever team that he plays for, he's always going to go out there and try to find star players to play with him. And I mean, it's one of those where it could work in LA with LeBron, but what would the Lakers want to give up, and what do the Lakers have that the Wizards would be interested in? The Boston Celtics, and I'm only throwing this out there because just to hypothetically say, would Boston want to break up Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum? Because you're not going to make a trade for a guy like Bradley Beal and keep both Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. The The likelihood of that to me, I think, is very unlikely. I do feel that the Celtics are still committed to both Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. And finally, the Miami Heat. And I say this because obviously we saw earlier this week the Heat lost in the NBA Finals to the Denver Nuggets. And it's quite clear that the Heat definitely need another star player. Jimmy Butler is good, but he's not a guy that's going to put you on his back for 30 to 35 points. The Heat need another scorer, and I think they're going to go out there and try to make a move this summer. Obviously, in this scenario, the Wizards and Heat play in the same division. Very rarely do you see teams within the same division make trades, and of course, in this case, it would be good thinking about Brad Beal in Miami, but at the same time, it wouldn't be enough for Miami championship wise because they're still lacking size. So these are five teams that I'm just throwing out there, and I'll get back to the Knicks um, as promised because you think about it, Brad Beal is a guy that has been unable to stay healthy in the last couple of years. He's only played in 90 games over the last 2 years, and you could already hear the groan somewhat from Knicks fans if that were the case because Knicks fans have been long suffering fans. And with that said, they've seen their teams, quote unquote, mortgage a future for a star player and it doesn't work out. They've seen their team mortgage a future for a guy that they were hoping that would be a star player and it just didn't work out. And the thing is, for the sake of argument, if the Knicks were to go out there and get Brad Beal, it does not make them a championship team. And honestly, at the end of the day, the Knicks should probably still be back, in the same spot, which is being a second round team. So I'm really not sure if New York were to go out there and do it. Like I said, Philly, it would be a long shot. The Lakers, maybe. The Celtics, a long shot. The Heat, a long shot just because um, the Heat and the Wizards are in the same division. But, when you think about a guy like Beal, he has been one of the better scorers of this era. And you're thinking about this guy, he's just 151 points shy of surpassing Elvin Hayes for the most points scored in Wizards franchise history. But at the end of the day, should we be surprised that Bradley Beal could be traded? And I'm going to say no. And one of the reasons is this: we saw Brad Beal get that super max contract last year, and there was a lot of speculation about it, about would he or wouldn't he. And I thought then that the writing was on the wall that Beal's time in Washington could be done. Um, and with that said, we've seen players in recent years where not too long after the ink dries on said new deal with their current team because they know they can get more years and more money from their current team, the next thing you know, it might be time to move on. But I'm going to put part of this on Brad Beal, and I'm also going to put part of this on the Washington Wizards because the Wizards have been a go nowhere franchise for the last 40 years. You're talking about a team, you got to go back to the late 70s. Matter of fact, the last time that the Wizards won a championship, I do believe, 78 and 79. They won 78 and then they got back to the NBA Finals in 79 and lost to the Sonics. So that was the last time that Washington made the Eastern Conference Finals. And you're talking about more than 40 years of that. You're also talking about in most recent history, 4 out of the last 5 years, Washington has not even made the NBA playoffs. So that just gives you an idea. Washington has had talented players there over the years, but they just can't get it done. John Wall, Brad Beal, Chris Webber, Gilbert Arenas. We can go right down the list. But the Wizards, Bullets, whatever they've been, they just have been unable to get it done, and that's just the way that franchise is. You would ask what direction that they're going in, but you never know. And you could make the case that the Washington Wizards, this side of the Sacramento Kings, lead the league NBA wise as far as starting over because you constantly see this team in quote unquote rebuild mode, but they really haven't done anything to say that they're rebuilding from. So I look at it where, to me, Brad Beal with the Wizards was a marriage made in heaven from the standpoint that, you know what, this guy could put up the numbers, but the Washington Wizards would never win. Bradley Beal is a scorer. He's not going to be a guy that's going to make the players around him better. But I definitely think in the right situation, in the right team, with the right talent around him, he could definitely flourish. That's why I brought up the New York Knicks, due to the fact of you would be playing with a point guard like Jalen Brunson, who would definitely set him up. And Jalen Brunson is a guy who knows how to play off of star guards. Just look at what he did previously with the Dallas Mavericks. Of course, I mentioned Brad Beal's injury history. I'm going to bring it up again. Only 90 games over the last 2 years. I'm not going to put all of that on Brad Beal, because part of that is the Washington Wizards again. Because if you look at the recent trend in the NBA in recent years, when teams are out of it, their star players shut it down. Typically, it could be a mutual thing between player and team. Sometimes it's just players, sometimes it's just team. Whereas, you know what, we're out of it. We're going to take a look at the young guys. And, sometimes the vets are like, hey, you know what, you're out of it. I'm not going to risk myself to more injury or anything like that. And of course, in this case of Brad Beal, he's got his money. So he's definitely good. But at the end of the day, I think Bradley Beal on the right team would be motivated to go out there and prove himself. You think about it, this is a guy who has averaged more than 22 points for his career, averaged more than 30 points in a season twice. So, again, the guy definitely knows how to fill up the buckets. So, the question is, what is next for Bradley Beal? I don't know, but I will tell you this. I think it is a very slim possibility that you see Bradley Beal in a Washington Wizards uniform next season. I think now, if you're the Wizards, you definitely want to go out there and strike a deal, because this is prior to the NBA draft. So if you trade Beal now, you have an opportunity to get assets back, picks and players that could help you next season. Also, let's be realistic. I think there's a better chance of Kristaps Porzingis coming back than Kyle Kuzma. And I say that because I don't see Kyle Kuzma going out there and playing for $13 million next season. When I think Kyle Kuzma, if he opts out, which everybody expects him to do, Kyle Kuzma probably has a better opportunity to get more money for more years on the open market. For Kristaps Porzingis, I don't see anybody paying him $36 million next season. But if Porzy wanted to go out there and get a new deal, a new long-term deal, he possibly could do that just for less money. But in the case of Beal, obviously things are different, because with the Wizards, you can go out there and find a trade partner. But of course, this scenario is a little bit different, because you have to work with Brad Beal. Because if you trade Brad Beal to a team, or attempt to trade Brad Beal to a team, guess what? And he don't want to go, it ain't going to happen. Even if that team is willing to give you more assets and more value than somebody else. So if you're the Wizards, you definitely want to go out there and get this done prior to the NBA draft. So I think this is the start of another exciting summer in the NBA. Is kind of like in that video game mode where you know that you're going to see a lot of player movement. You're going to hear the rumors between now and the NBA draft. You're going to hear about trades at the NBA draft. And of course, when free agency begins on the 1st of July, guess what? Teams are going to be off to the races. A lot of moves, but right here, this could be the first domino to fall of what is expected to be a big summer in the NBA. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.